We are broadcasting live from the Utah State Capitol, where just moments ago we wrapped up a press conference where we announced two important pieces of legislation designed to protect Utah students and restore academic excellence in our classrooms, the SAFE Act and the Balance Act. Joining me today to discuss how we can continue to lead in putting children first in a digital age is Dr. Jared Cooney-Horvath, neuroscientist, former classroom teacher, and author of Digital Delusion, Representative Ariel DeFay, sponsor of the Balance Act, and Representative Doug Theophea, House floor sponsor of the SAFE Act. So let's jump right in and talk policy. So Representative Theophea, for those who did not join the press conference, I want to give them a quick 30-second overview of the SAFE Act, what it does, and what you expect to see happen in Utah classrooms.
Sure, thanks, Corinne. I think the idea behind the SAFE Act is making sure that there's a clear standard of software that enters into the classroom. What we've seen is constant tools being introduced to our kids without those clear standards, and parents wondering, is this safe? Is this legal? And is my kid actually learning? And so that's what we want, is we just want consistency of all tools to ensure that when these tools are introduced to our kids, that they are with an emphasis in learning.
Ariel.
Yes, I'm sponsoring the Balance Act, and the act is simply required to balance the use of technology with analog learning in the classroom and to get back to a more balanced approach to learning. And we do this through a tiered approach and a graduated approach to how much technology we're using by grade, and then also putting parameters and guardrails around the technology usage and also AI usage. So to sum it up, we want to bring balance back to our children.
Thank you. So Ariel, you are not just a legislator, but a mom, and you've experienced firsthand what it's like to raise kids in a digital age. What have you seen as you visited Utah classrooms, worked with your own children, talked to school districts, that made you want to run the Balance Act and implement this important policy?
Thank you for the question. I have seen a proliferation of screens in the classroom. I have had difficulties with my own children, helping them at the kitchen table try to work through different assignments and struggling and crying and trying to get them to focus, and for some reason they can't, and it's because we just learned that their brains literally cannot do it because they're not trained that way. More than that, my own children, is I have had parent after parent come to me because they knew I've been on this journey for about 10 years and trying to restore balance in the classroom, and coming to me with their own stories and their own children who are struggling. And when we finally came up with this idea, I have not had one person say, that's a bad idea. Every time I talk about it, I get this giant sigh of relief, like, that's amazing, and I want that for my child. And so that's really the fuel behind what I'm able to do, and I think the reason we're going to get this passed, because parents, teachers, students, and administrators are recognizing that this is needed.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree, as one of those parents who has spent many nights frustrated with tech use with my own kids. Now, Representative Theophea, you come from a tech background, which many people might not know. So from that vantage point, what are you seeing in the tech industry, including the entire attention economy, data collection, AI, privacy, that made it clear that safeguards in education are necessary?
Well, there's a lot that I have to say on this. Coming from the tech industry, I worked at Google for 5 years. I know for a fact that these tools, many of them in the classroom, were not created for education, but they were adapted for education. And what that means is they were created for engagement, which is a fancy way of saying in the tech industry is this attention economy, which means these tools were made to make sure that your kids are continually clicking, scrolling, and making sure that they stay on these tools for as long as possible. Now, when you introduce those type of tools that were built for engagement into the classroom, it no longer becomes a tool. And that's the fear that me, also as a parent, and many parents that I'm hearing from in my district, is worried about, is that we constantly throw these tools in front of kids, and they are getting more addicted to the screens, right? I talked to a tech CEO worried about these bills, and they said, well, this is already what they're doing, and so it's better that they do it in the classroom under supervision than not. And I said, no. They should be learning in the classroom, not in front of a screen. And so when you talk about these tools and what they're doing, it really is harming kids. Now, when we move forward to the whole artificial intelligence and where technology is moving, I'm afraid that these tools are just using the same LLMs or large language models that we are seeing, the ChatGPTs, the Claudes, the Groks. They're using the same tools, white labeling it and saying it's a different tool. Again, adapted for education. I don't know if you guys know the story of Adam Rain in California, who was instructed by ChatGPT and led through to his suicide. These are the harms that we run into when our kids are in front of tools that have not been tested and not have a clear standard like we will have in Utah. And so I'm looking forward to this work being done and us making sure that our kids are safe in the classroom and also out of the classroom.
Thank you, and I appreciate you highlighting that this attention economy was not designed for our children. And these policies they have been designed to help put learning first. And there's two of them. So Ariel, can you tell us a little bit about how these two policies are intentionally designed to work together, one addressing classroom, one addressing software, and what changes we expect to see?
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, so I am running the Balance Act, and that is really looking at the hardware that we are using. How often are we pulling screens up in front of our children in classrooms? And really, the best feedback that I got on this journey was from elementary school teachers who said, we actually don't even need it in K through 3. We really could limit this. And so really that was the seed where this bill came from. And we got that feedback over and over again from teachers that the behavioral issues that come from screens aren't worth it and they're not learning. And so we started looking at, okay, well then does it make sense to slowly introduce technology and use it more and more as they're able to be mature enough to manage it? And at the same time, are the tools that they're using benefiting them? Are they safe? Are they legal? Are they effective? And we kind of all came to this conclusion around the same time, and we got together and decided, how can we make a package so that we are addressing really both problems, the computers in the screens in front of the children and also the tools that are being deployed on them and the children are using to learn on. We want to know that they're working. And so really we kind of all sat down and figured out how are we going to do it, who's going to carry what bill, who's passionate about what, and that's kind of how this was all born.
Collaboration at its finest, right? And that is the Utah way. And speaking of Utah, why is Utah poised, Doug, to lead on this issue? And then, how do we hope that what we do in Utah can impact the rest of the nation? Because we know from the data, this is not just a Utah problem, but this is a nationwide problem and something even globally that our children are experiencing.
Interesting enough, Utah is leading the way when it comes to tech and AI policy. We were one of the first in the country to pass comprehensive AI policy. We created an Office of AI Policy here in the state of Utah, which is the first of its kind, and many states are following. We also were one of the first to declare war on big tech, which is huge. It's never comfortable to step out and be left behind, but we fought and we've won. Last session, we passed a bill. I had the opportunity to sponsor the Digital Choice Act, which gave us the opportunity as Utahns to own, manage, and control our own data. Now, what is happening with big tech today is they use our data and information, it informs an algorithm, and they sell that algorithm to advertisers for billions of dollars. That's based off of ours. This bill then changes that. And so when we, Utah, step forward time and time again, states start noticing and they start saying, what is going on in Utah? What are they doing? And these two bills coupled together, I think will be a standard for the rest of the country to look, and I'm excited to share it with other states.
That's our hope as well, and why the Child First policy has been created here in the state of Utah to lead these bills here and then to support them as hopefully we pass them all across the nation. So I really want to thank you, Representative DeFay, Representative Diafia, for taking on this challenge. It's a heavy lift. Like you said, we're fighting big tech. We're looking closely at what's happening in our classrooms, and we have parents, you have support behind you as we move forward. And we're really excited to talk about this policy direction. Now, Bill's language is still being drafted, which provides a wonderful opportunity to look at what's behind this policy. Because whenever we do good policy, we have to say, what's the science? What's the data? What is backing this up? And that's why we're so grateful to have Dr. Jared Cooney-Horvath with us today to help us make sense of some of this data. And he has a gift of taking numbers and science and translating it into a language that those of us in the lay world can understand and can help us as we navigate this path. You are not just a neuroscientist, but a former teacher and someone who began your career in the classroom. And so I really want to begin there in this discussion with what did you see as a teacher that would lead you on this journey to become a neuroscientist, a best-selling Amazon author, and to this policy panel here today?
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for having me on. And you guys chime in whenever you guys want, if you got good data and stuff to share. Back when I was teaching, tech was still just an adjunct. You had a tech lab. Cool. I'm going to type for 1 hour a week. Sweet. I went back to school purely just because I thought if I understood how the brain worked better, that would make me a better teacher. Whether or not that worked, who knows? But during that time, then, my focus has been on learning. And I always just assumed, like, people would ask me, how often do you talk about tech? Rarely, man. I could do a 36-hour master's course on learning and never bring up tech. Because once you understand how learning works, it's obvious why tech wouldn't work. So you never had to waste time on it. It wasn't until COVID where the discussions really started to get very big, and that's when I figured, let's jump on and say, okay, more people need to know that their learning is a biological process. If you understand that, then we can push back against what's actually going on here. So the screens have gotten much worse. I didn't watch it firsthand in my classroom, but I have been privy to it as a college professor, watching the next generation come through. By the way, we were talking about that earlier today. Sorry for the tangent. Did you know the university I used to work at, I won't name names, the last year I worked there, and this is one of the reasons why I quit, they flat out told me I can no longer fail students. Excuse me? Basically, they were saying if they paid tuition, they get a degree. And that's what I mean by reducing rigor. Instead of saying, uh-oh, kids are struggling, let's do better, even university has said, uh-oh, kids are struggling, let's do less. And I don't understand that. So there are doctors in this particular school region that I used to work at that if I see their medical degree and they graduated from certain classes, I will not go to that doctor because I know they didn't get the best education. So it's happening across the board.
I think that's so fascinating because at the university level, isn't that where we're supposed to be following the science and following the data, right?
You'd hope.
And so in your research as a neuroscientist, what does the research actually say about how children learn best, particularly in those early and middle grades? I think that's a foundational thing for us to understand as we address policy to make sure we're getting it right.
Absolutely. Especially during those early ages, we're in a very, very wickedly social state. So you guys have all heard of empathy. Empathy is a thing. Most people misunderstand what empathy is. People think empathy is an emotion. Like, I'm empathetic. The truth is, nobody has empathy. You don't have it, I don't have it. Empathy isn't a personal emotion. It's a transpersonal emergent property. What empathy is when two sets of biology start to synchronize. We call that empathy. So in a very real sense, if you are empathizing with me right now, our heartbeats would start to beat at the same time. We would start to breathe in tandem. If I could image our brains will now start to mirror one another. That is one of the key drivers of learning, especially amongst younger kids, is an empathetic relationship. And I won't bore you with the details, but if you look at the effect sizes of what works in the classroom, empathetic student-teacher relationship is massive, is about 3.5 times higher than some of the best tech stuff we have right now. So this is where you start to learn evolved to learn from each other. By all means, we can learn from other things. We do all the time. I learn from books. We learn from TV. We can. But that empathetic connection to another human being makes learning better, faster, easier. Understanding becomes a little bit deeper. So especially during those earlier years, as you get older, we can futz it a little bit more. But that's when relationships are all important. And that's one thing you can't, if think about it, if empathy requires two pairs of biology syncing up, does a computer have biology? So by definition, the more we use tech, we lose an entire aspect of learning that we know drives it better than most other things out there. So that's one of the, especially amongst younger kids, we say it's get back to people, get back to relationships.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful. As parents, we see that as we engage with our own children and learn to build that empathy within our family systems. Then we send them into the world, to school, and we're seeing that connection being lost in the education system. And that is something that has been, parents have noticed.
Yeah.
And I wonder from you, Jared, your perspective, what is the biggest misconception that you think parents and educators specifically have about screen-based learning? Maybe especially that assumption that the more technology in the schools is necessary to lead to better outcomes, or that technology is required to learn, being on technology is required to know technology, that kind of, catch-22 is we want a tech-ready workforce, we got to put them on tech. What are your thoughts about those misconceptions?
Oh, geez, don't get me started. All right.
I'll take all the time you want.
Based on international data, kids in 2013 are more computer literate than kids in 2023. Like not even close, about a 20% differential. In fact, if you're a millennial, you're more computer literate than Gen Z. Now the joke is during that 10-year period that we were measuring all this stuff, computer usage within schools increased by about 500%. So kids were spending wickedly more time on tech, being trained on tech, yet their ability to use tech was decreasing. How could that possibly be? Here's where you see literacy is completely misunderstood. Being able to touch a tool, experience with a tool is not literacy. Literacy is understanding of patterns. It's a deep recognition of systems and systems-based thinking. How do you develop that? Through a traditional K through 12 general education. And one of the biggest ironies we've ever seen, if you want to prepare your kids for an unknown digital workforce, do not put them in front of a computer. Teach them how to think. This is why K through 12 education was never a tools-based education. We have that. In Australia, they're called TAFE. Here, they're called ITT Institutes. I will teach you how to be a welder in 2 years. But we're not stupid enough to think if I teach you how to use welding tools, you're also going to be a wonderful carpenter. Because we know that when I teach you on a tool, you are going to be locked to that tool. And if the field ever changes, let's say welding evolves and now your tool is obsolete, so is your training. Well, you're now going to have to go back to the drawing board. When we started to teach kids how to use tech, cool, they use the tech we taught them. How fast does tech change? Their skills become obsolete like that. It's like teaching kids how to rent a video in 1999. Sounded good at the time, and today it's like, well, that was a waste of time. So that's why school, K through 12 education, has never been a tools-based system. We are not here to teach you how to use that. We're here to teach you how to think. Teach your kids how to use a tool, they'll be able to use that tool. Teach your kids how to learn and drive their own thinking, they will be able to use any tool. That's why millennials, we didn't have to train on tech, and we are better at it than our kids, even though they've used it an order of magnitude more than we have, because we know how to think. Learn the skill first, and then use the tool to offload the skill. Do not try and use the offloading device to learn a skill. And that's, I won't bore you too much with that, but I think that's a very important thing to recognize about tech. Tech is a production tool. It is not a learning tool. Tech was built to make experts our jobs easier. And the only reason it works is because we can vet the output. Well, like, take statistics, right? I can do statistics. It'll take me about 2 hours to do one data set, but I could do it by hand if I needed to. It'll take that machine 2 seconds to do it. But the only reason it works is because I can immediately vet. When it spits out a number, I can say, yep, that's right. Or no, what the heck is that number? I must have input the data wrong. Go to a kid, they're novices. They have no clue what's good, what's bad, what's wrong. So when they use the same tool I use to offload their thinking, they will never learn the original skill and they will never have any clue if what's coming out is right, wrong, or indifferent. Basically, they learn nothing. They produce, and they hand it to us and we go, you didn't do that. That's so clearly AI, but thanks for trying, kid. And they develop no skills or abilities. So learn the skill first and then use the computer to offload. Learn to write and then learn to type. Learn to do math and then bring in the calculator. It's been the same for decades. I don't know why we thought it changed because tech started to move faster or got cheaper. That was a very strange way to think.
It sounds like you're describing the way I learned growing up. And I think as parents, we remember our education and feel that level of frustration. And from a parent's perspective, we do see that something's happening to our kids. We see the attention, the learning, the frustration, but often we're told that it's anecdotal, that that's just how education is these days, that, we just need to let the education system, teach our kids and figure this out.
Yeah.
But you are making a very strong case that this is not anecdotal, that science actually does back up this thing that parents are seeing on the ground. So what advice do you have for parents who feel dismissed or even defeated? Especially sometimes our education system can be dismissive and a little hostile towards parents. And then second, with the tech industry involved, with the money and the power involved, what can parents do to help influence what's happening in the classroom, have a voice again, and what evidence can we point to as parents that backs up what we're seeing on the ground that can help us as we try to make these changes in our classroom environments for our children?
Oh, I love it. And I do not mean to be a salesman here, but in the book we just published, there's a whole chapter on just what can we do as parents, and there's one for teachers, but it's spot on. And I would say the kind of biggest things are, as a parent, you have to start at home, and it sucks, but that's why buy a printer, ban AI from your house, especially for learning purposes. Do unplug Sundays. Make sure your kids print out every bit of homework they have. Start building these systems at home so that your kids get these habits, and then when they're in the classroom, they start to feel a little bit more miffed. The more that they realize, oh, wait a second, I read better with a book, and now my teacher's giving me a screen. You're going to get some good allies from your kids there. But when it comes to pushing back at the larger level, step one is get a coalition. One voice is annoying, and you will be labeled a troublemaker. But to be fair, mate, I carry a troublemaker card. I don't care. But one voice, you will be dismissed. But even a small minority. Just look at birds. For a long time, we looked at like flocks of birds and we wondered, how do they fly in synchrony? 10,000 starlings all turn at the same time. How? It turns out a very small minority makes the decision. Less than 5% of the birds have to choose to turn, and the other 95 will go with them immediately. So when you're forming a coalition, it doesn't have to be every teacher or every parent that you know. Get a small enough group. Together, as your voices start to push back, that should be enough to turn everyone with you. And what you're going to need to do is you're going to need kind of 3 levels. This is one, you're going to need your own anecdotal evidence. What's going on with your kids, your district, your school? Absolutely. 2, you're going to need hard data. Where do you get it? That's my job. So ask me. I'm going to publish as much as I can. I'm going to give you as much data as you would ever need to possibly push back. But that's where you're going to hit a wall, because data never changes minds. Think about it. We knew for decades that asbestos would cause cancer. If you worked with asbestos, you were probably going to die of cancer way more than people who didn't. If you used leaded gasoline, your kids were going to come out with brain damage a lot more than kids who didn't use leaded gasoline. The data didn't change anyone's mind. It's mechanism. Only once researchers could tell you, here is exactly why this is happening. Asbestos little pieces can break off, enter your lungs, cause tumor growth, there's your cancer. Once we have mechanism, that's when people listen. That's when getting back to learning. We call it metacognition. Understand the learning process. If you can tell people not only here is the data, but that data looks like that because learning works like this, that's when people will start to change minds. And so that's the other thing. I will give you as many numbers as I can, but I'm also going to try and give you as much as I can mechanisms to say, like empathy, like multitasking, like concepts of transfer, so that you can push back and say, it's not just numbers, it's not correlation, it's not magic, it's biological, and you can't push back against that. So as much as you can, dive into we call it the science of learning, but literature on how learning works, and that's where you're going to find your leverage points. Does that kind of I feel bad, sorry, does that make sense? I feel, and I will help as I can. Just bother me as much as you need.
It makes complete sense, Jared. And actually, in the press conference, you talked about this multitasking problem that doesn't really match with biology of how we learn. And I think it would be great to dive into that a little bit more from that cognitive perspective and the multitasking perspective of what's happening to our kids when they are in the classroom in a tech-heavy, screen-heavy environment. Why are they struggling?
It's the same reason. So thing number one about human learning, we don't transfer skills very easily. If I learn in a red room, I will perform well in a red room. But if you put me in a green room now and say, do the same thing, my performance is going to drop a little bit. So transfer is one of the biggest problems we have with skill learning. Take a computer now. So a kid spends thousands of hours a year using this computer to do one thing, multitask, multitask, multitask. Now we say use the exact same screen to do something else. They won't be able to transfer that skill out. Most of them are going to go back to exactly what they know. I always kind of say like this. I grew up driving in the US, right? So stick shift is over here, wheels over here. I moved to Australia where the stick shift is over here and the wheels over here. I was there for 12 years. Did not matter that I was fine. I could drive there totally fine. Anytime I was stressed and I went to my car, what's the first thing I would do? Get into the wrong side and reach for it and be like, oh, my bad, over here. 12 years didn't erase my original story. So this is why we can't expect, we've already trained them to do one thing. We will never expect them to lose that ability or that skill. So the more we try and shove this screen in their face, they're going to go back to what they know how to do, multitasking. Now, what happens when you multitask? Just 3 things to think of. One is called, so best way to think about attention, think of it kind of like a filter. Right? There is way too much stuff bombarding your brain at any one moment. We can't take it all in, so you have to set up a filter. That determines what's relevant, makes it into your conscious awareness, I can learn it. What's irrelevant gets blocked out. So believe it or not, 90% of the world you're missing. There's stuff going on right now that you're never going to get. But that's fine, that's attention. The problem is we only have one attention slot in our brain. It's a little nugget here behind our left eye. So anytime we want to do 2 things at the same time, we can't do them simultaneously. The best we can do is start one, take out that filter, put in a new one, jump to this one. Take out that filter, back to the old one, over to this one. Now, swapping your filter takes time. So this is every time your kid opens a tab, every time your kid checks a new email, goes to a new program. Swapping your filter basically takes about 0.2 seconds, during which time your brain goes black. You process absolutely nothing. So you start to go slower when you're multitasking. Every time you switch out your filter as well, your brain erases about a half second of what you were just doing. Your brain assumes if you're doing something new, that must now be done and irrelevant. And the last half second of whatever you were doing there is gone for good. That's why our performance, our accuracy starts to suffer. We literally start forgetting what's happening. And to make matters worse, whenever you multitask, your brain stops using your primary memory network and it uses the striatum. Yay, good word, Cooney. Thank you. All you got to know is the striatum is basically the weakest memory system we have. The striatum is used to do automatic tasks. You cannot consciously access it. But when you're multitasking, your brain assumes, cool, you're just trying to build programs, and it uses your striatum. So whatever you learn while multitasking, you might get it into your biology, but you can never consciously really access it. So your memory tanks significantly. So this is why I say, man, we have the biological mechanisms. We can point to it for 20 years. Here's exactly what's happening when you put a screen in front of a kid, and yet we just keep doing it. And so people say, well, what if I just lock the screen? Absolutely. You could lock a screen so that a kid can do nothing but one thing on that screen. Guess how well that's going to work? Australia tried this. They have their it's called the ATAR. It's basically their version of the SATs. Every kid has to take it at the exact same time. They all in every city, they all go to these big testing centers. Everyone turns on their computer. They all start at the same moment. They had that thing locked down. No kid will be able to hack this system. 4 minutes it took for one kid to hack the system and break the whole system. There was no ATAR that year.
Wow.
Unless you have a hard tool, like a speak and say, right? Remember we had those as kids, press the letter A, it says A. There's nothing else you can do on that. That might be a good ed tech tool. But as soon as you have an internet connected device that allows you to do anything more than one thing, the kids are going to find a way to play with it. And that's why we got to get rid of those guys.
That's why our nuclear codes are not online, right?
Yeah, true. We hope.
Yeah, we hope. So what role then should policy play in an education world where our classrooms and what's happening in classrooms has not caught up with this science and with this data?
So are you thinking what does schools need to do to change to adapt to that?
What policy?
I think you're listening to the two best policies here. One is going to be pure software, is say, cool, there's got to be a standard here. Right now, it's the Wild West. If you are an ed tech startup, you're going to get $10 million and you're going to get into schools. Why? We don't do that for anything else. If I invent a new drug, no one can take it until I spend about 7 years testing that thing. And 90% of our tests fail. We go, well, that was a waste of our time. We've never demanded that from tech. And so I think that's good step one. And then step two is going to be the hardware in the classroom question. Is cool. Now that we've got programs that we think are going to be effective, how are we actually leveraging the hardware in the organization of the classroom to say, we're not just free-for-alling this. Not every kid has a laptop. I think one of the strongest things schools will start doing again is reinstitute the computer lab. Because think about it. It's, yeah.
Like that.
Well, see y'all later. Because if you think about it, one of the biggest issues with tech is it's way too easy to use right now. So it becomes our default. Everyone just take out your laptop, we'll get going on there. If you reintroduce friction, now me as a teacher, I have to make the decision, okay, is it worth getting my kids up, getting them across the school, signing out this lab so no other teacher can use it at the time? Is that the most valid pedagogy for me to use right now, or is there something else we could be doing? When you reintroduce friction, then you make it deliberate. Now all of a sudden tech isn't the default, you genuinely are using it for a purpose and you're gonna try and use it a little bit better. So I think that's where the balance is gonna start to come in. Take it out of every kid's backpack and reinstitute structure again. So it's not gone. By all means, if you want to learn coding, probably is going to be good to use it on a computer, although some people might argue against that. I don't know. So it's not that we're not going to touch it. It's just we're not going to teach everything through it. And that realistically, I think, is a big concept for us as parents to understand. Curriculum versus pedagogy. Curriculum is what we teach. Pedagogy is how we teach. You can make a curriculum argument. We need to teach kids computer skills. Sweet, that's a class, go for it. Somehow, through some linguistic alchemy, that argument has morphed into we need to teach all classes through a computer. That's a pedagogical argument, and now you've just jumped ship, and it doesn't work anymore. But most people don't notice that we just made that jump. So you can comfortably say, yes, we need to teach computer skills, and at the same time say we do not need our kids to have a computer all day, every day, and the two are not contradictory in any way, shape, or form. We use the pedagogy that aligns best with the material we're learning. Are you learning to read? Don't need a screen. Are you learning math? Don't need a screen. You're learning history? Don't need a screen. You're learning coding? Need a screen. Go for it. Curriculum versus pedagogy. Make sure you have your mind on those two things set, and notice how quickly people you are pushing back against will just conflate the two. And if you can keep that hard line, that's how you can push back pretty easily too.
Wow. I love that. Those are our new words, everyone. Curriculum versus pedagogy. Say it again. Pedagogy.
Pedagogy.
Pedagogy. Pedagogy. All right. We have it. We have it now. So when you look at the national data, all right, it's pretty terrifying. And you've talked about this a little, and for those who aren't with us for the press conference, you can repeat this cognitive decline because it is really shocking. But I also want to talk about Utah as well.
Yeah.
Because Utah ranks 4th in the nation for education. Yet there was just a report released recently that says that not even 50% of our kids are reading on grade level. So maybe even 4th in the nation is immune. It's not immune to this ed tech problem. So let's dive a little bit into that. Just what we're seeing in terms of cognitive decline, ability, reading, learning, both nationwide and here in Utah.
So the data I need to make a really strict argument, I just don't have access to, but something important to know. Most of the tests we use are now going to be considered, back in the day, everything was standardized. If you ran a test on whether or not tech was going to work, you had to use this test. Now teachers develop their own tests, researchers develop their own tests, and those tests suit the tool. So on the ground, it's going to look like things are going up. When as soon as you take kids out of that classroom and say, can you do that same exact thing over here at the dinner table, you'll see they didn't really learn much. And that's why I think you'll hear a lot of parents saying, my kids are getting good grades, but really? Like, our conversations are shallow as heck. What's going on here? That's it. It's the way we're testing it. We're making the tests align with the tech rather than determining what it is we really want. But the data I do have access to is the NAEP, so the national data. Now, that data is really interesting. in that it is the only real national test that doesn't re-norm. So every test you've ever seen, PISA, SATs, TIMS, IQ test, we always re-norm it, which says basically about every 10 years we reset the scale so that this generation looks like that generation. So if everyone took a test this year and they got a 20, everyone took it next year and they got a 10, we're like, just give them 10 bonus points so everything looks the same. Renorming is like our dirty little secret. We do it all the time. The NAEP doesn't renorm, which makes it the coolest test in the world. Everything is tacked to 1990. What a kid does today, they're comparing to what kids did in 1990. It's like the only straight shot we got. So what happens? From 1990 up to about 2012, kids get better. Sweet. What happens in 2012?
Yeah.
Smartphones come in hardcore. One-to-one programs really start to get instituted around the US. Here's where we see everything drop. COVID, we got a huge tank. And then the 2 years after COVID, when everyone else in the world was back, we went down even further. Dang. Utah didn't. Y'all stayed flat. Y'all have this sweet little plateau. From about 2012, you did a little bit of a dip, and then you're just hanging out right here. And that makes everyone go, Utah, the ed state, which is awesome. By the way, I'm proud of you. That's really good. Here's the problem. From 2012 to 2023, in the time you guys haven't moved, you have increased your spending on ed tech by one order of magnitude. You've gone from 10 million to over $110 million every year on tech, and nothing happened. Basically, you didn't have to buy a single computer, and you would have expected the exact same scores today as if after buying all these one-to-one and all these other programs. One of the most damning bits of data is if you see a flatline NEAP score, that is scary as heck, but most people don't recognize it. They assume that must be a good mark. Hey, we're not getting worse. You're not getting worse, but you ain't getting better. And the entire function of the NEAP is we need to see movement. Anything that stagnates means whatever we're doing now ain't doing anything. I'd rather see a dip and know that was bad. Let's try something new. That's how that test is kind of refined. So just know, even in Utah, even though it's flat, that is not a signal of benefit. That's a signal of wasted money. Now, if you'd have spent that $110 million per year on teacher training or development, would we have seen growth? And that's what you want to see. So it looks good on paper, but once you really dive in, there's some scariness behind it. Sorry for going long.
Thank you for that interpretation. So I wanted to just end with one question about what is the dream scenario for you? If Utah passes these two pieces of legislation and we get that classroom that really supports learning, what does it look like? And then how do we make sure this happens across the nation?
Yeah. Think back to 1999. That's what I want school to look like today. I know it's crazy, but what do you got? You got kids running around, they're in the hallways during class, they sit there and they look forward, and some of them are a little bored, some of them are a little excited. They go to the playground, they yell at each other, they kick each other, they come back in, they're best friends the next week. All of that stuff matters. And we've just kind of built this world in this school, this classroom now that basically separates kids as much as we humanly possibly can, and we deal with individual kids. We don't need individuals, we need collective. And that gets back to socialization. So if you didn't, like, people are, and I love bell-to-bell cell phone bans.
We're going to do it.
Wonderful.
We're going to do it in Utah.
Wonderful. And I always say that is a great first step. Because now you need to start thinking bell-to-bell screen bans. How many parents are working their butts off right now to make sure their kids do not have screen time at home, only to go to school and spend 4 hours on a screen? So this is where once we see that we can make that change. Remember, 5 years ago, people said there's no way you can ban cell phones. Watch us. The same thing they're going to start saying about tech. There's no way you're going to get rid of one-to-one laptops. Do it and see what happens. There will not be a single teacher who is mad at you for making that move. Ask any teacher when the cell phones are gone, is it better? Yep. Ask any teacher as soon as they start to pull tech back, is it better? The answer will always be yes. So that's my vision, but I want to make sure I get your guys' visions too.
Yes.
No, I align with you. I agree. I think you addressed one of my concerns, and my concern is how do the teachers react to this data, and how do they feel that they can adjust, and does our dream classroom fit that? Because I don't want them to feel undue pressure. But yeah, bell to bell, let's do it. If it doesn't get done this year, let's do it next year.
Exactly.
But if someone's doing it, you have my vote.
Love it.
Tomorrow at
Great.
11.
Tomorrow at 11.
Let's stay here live.
Yes. Yes.
Just end by saying this. Everyone in the room, hopefully in the broadcast you can feel this. There's a movement happening. And you have a room full of parents, teachers, people in the community who care. And what you'll see change this next year is huge for the future of Utah. This is not just a thing that will happen and change for 1 year or 2 years. This will change the trajectory of our state. And so thank you so much for being here. Thank you guys all for being here and supporting this movement. But this is just the beginning, and we have a lot of work to do. So
Yeah.
Amazing.
Thank you all.
Wonderful. We wanted to leave some time for our audience to ask some questions of our panelists. So questions are open for all three of them. And we have one mic, so I'm going to try and repeat the question that I hear. So I think it'll be too difficult to pass the mic back and forth. So Dina's gonna point out who's got questions. They're gonna come right up here. Actually, we can do it. If
We can do a handoff.
if you're comfortable being in our broadcast, we'd love to have you come on up, ask your question. Welcome.
So my question actually is something that you brought up during the press part of it. And that was, you said assessment that was done with students who were taught analog and students who were taught digital.
Yep.
And the students who were taught analog did better.
Yep.
How was this across the board? How were these kids, how were they taught?
Yep.
Was it a test that they were doing?
Yeah. So if you take a look, so easiest way to see it is PISA. PISA is an international test. I think last year they had 79 countries. We're talking about 780,000 year 9 kids around the world. One of the questions they'll ask is, per day, how many hours on average do you use a computer for learning purposes at school? 0, up to 1, up to 2, up to 3, up to 4, up to 5, to 6. The line almost always goes straight down. The kids who just say we don't use computers at school almost invariably do better, significantly so, than ones who use it for an hour, then to 2 hours, then to 3 hours, then to 4 hours. So they're not looking at specific pedagogy. In that instance, they're just looking at straight tools. Do you use computers for learning? And the kids who say more.
And when the data was extracted, were these entire classrooms? Was it?
This is 79 countries and 700 plus thousand kids. So what they do is they just randomly select, say, 100,000 kids across Chile and 50,000 kids across Japan, and all these kids take this test. So it's not any specific district, it's not any specific school, it's more a snapshot of a country. How is your country doing this? And the less kids are using tech, the better those countries are doing. No, thank you.
Okay, we've got another question here. Come on.
There we go.
Thank you so much for stepping up to take this on. This is such an important matter. Just a bit of personal background. My son was exposed on his Chromebook at age 11 during COVID to pornography. And it's been a huge problem in our family, and I know we're not the only ones. So my question goes around the accountability. So for things like filters and that kind of thing, if you require a school district or a school to have filters and these checks and balances, how are you going to hold them accountable? And how are you going to hold these tech companies accountable? Because I think that's where I can see somebody says, yes, we have a filter, check, we've got that. Does that filter really work? And if it doesn't, who's held responsible? What are the policies to change that? What can we do as parents to say, hey, this isn't working? So that's
Give that to Doug.
So this is where the SAFE Act comes into play. It's hard to change any software without a clear standard, and that's what changes here is we set a clear standard. As parents are seeing things happen, they can report it, and then we can adjust the standard as needed. I substitute teach for fun, which it's really hard. We have amazing teachers in Utah. but I went and substitute taught, and it was a CTE class, a technology class. Everyone had their computers out, and then I noticed all these games and all these things. I'm like, I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to be on that. How are you accessing that from your accounts? Well, turns out that this 7th and 8th grade class has a Google Doc full of links to bypass all of the filters in the school.
Yeah.
This is happening in our schools, and this isn't some conspiracy theory. This is something that I saw firsthand, and I said, okay, if you are on a prohibited website, after this, you will have to stand up and do a TikTok dance. And you know, this generation, I have kids in this generation, if you make them embarrass themselves, they follow the rules, and so they followed it. And so this is where we have to set a clear standard. It's happening in our schools, and it's no fault at anyone. We're not pointing fingers at anyone. This is where we change it, is with the SAFE Act.
Yep.
All right. Got one over here.
Hi, I just have been brainstorming during this. I also have been, I'm Kathleen Barlow, part of the Child First Policy Center, and also Smart Home for Childhood US. So,
Definitely.
Come
Come on. There you go.
um,
Beautiful.
I have a lot of skin in the game. I have 6 kids, 4 grandkids, 1 on the way. And I taught for 10 years. And I'm also substitute teaching this year in the Granite School District. I wouldn't go right to fun, but it's been really eye-opening and enjoyable too. But I have seen all the things you're saying and more. But what I'm just thinking of is I have 2 grandsons who go to a charter school in Saratoga that is kind of Waldorf-based, actually no screens. And I see my grandson's brains. I cannot believe how they are just voracious. They want, as far as wanting to learn, they come to my house and they just want to learn about everything, and they're not used to being on screens all the time. And I think, can we do this in our Utah schools? Can we give parents the choice to go to a low screen school? When we hear Dr. Cooney-Horvath say that that the line goes straight down, right? The more tech kids are using, and I just think, can we do that? You know, can we have these options for parents? I'm just brainstorming.
And that is it. I think that's going to be the next, I don't want to jinx anything, but John Haidt's Anxious Generation comes out, bell-to-bell bans become a real thing. Opt-in, opt-out, I think, is going to be the next big battle. Because right now, if a parent wants to opt out, they get a lot of pushback. And I've heard public schools say, kid can't go here anymore. We're going to deny a kid a public education because they don't want to use a screen? I didn't even know that was legal, but what are you going to do? That will be the next big battle. And I think there was a school I worked with back in Australia. They offered an opt-out for parents who didn't want it. Only about 12 parents took it. But the teachers who worked with those kids now had to do twice the work. Everything they built, they had to do an analog version and a digital version. And it only took them about a month before they realized, look, I'm putting a lot more time and effort into this analog stuff, but it's working a lot better. All the kids were now doing the analog stuff. It took them about a month till everyone in those kids, they just got rid of screens in those classrooms because the teachers are like, it's harder work for me, but it's better work for everyone. And that was it. Just that one change was enough to kind of change the whole culture, which is very cool. So keep an eye on that.
I'm going to let Ariel tag on to this one.
Yeah, I would just like to say that what we're doing this year is what we can accomplish reasonably within the legislature. But like Representative Thea said, this is a movement. And we're taking baby steps this year, but if you are willing to speak up, to talk to your school board members, to talk to other parents and get them involved and help them understand what the data and the science is saying and teach them the mechanisms, then we can get people on board and we can make these changes. If we're serious about wanting an opt-out, then it's going to take the public to rise up and demand it.
I love it.
All right. We have time for another question here. Come right on in, nice and tight.
My biggest question and pushback that I've gotten being on community council is one, parental rights, and also the difference between digital literacy and ed tech. And I think parents don't understand the difference, and so they want computers and they want that tech in the schools so they can be digital literate children.
Yeah.
But they get that confused with ed tech, which is mainly what's in the classrooms.
Yeah.
So how do I help them understand that so they can see the difference and not think that, oh, it's just having computers in there makes a difference.
Yeah. A big issue is the term digital literacy itself. Literacy denotes something that's wickedly stable. When we say you are literate now, we meant the same thing 600 years ago. We were talking about reading literacy. There is no digital literacy. That's the problem, is we don't know what the heck it is. We don't know why it's constantly moving. So I think we need a new term for what we're talking about. How do you digital whatever? How do you work online? We need to get some sort of new phraseology for that so we can draw a line between that and tech use. With that said, though, touche, you can teach a kid to be nice on Facebook, or you can teach a kid to be nice in the real world. Here's what we see. The kid you teach to be nice on Facebook is not going to be nice in the real world. The kid you teach to be nice in the real world will be nice on Facebook. When you learn in a very nuanced, difficult real world, kids will move that skill online. That's why you don't see Gen X bullies. You don't see baby boomers online trolling each other, because they learned how to behave in the real world and they transfer that online. But when we try and teach kids how to behave in the online world, that almost never transfers out into the real world. So I'd say don't worry about digital literacy. Worry about life literacy, and you'll get that for free. I promise you.
Absolutely. Right. Okay, who's got our next question? Come on up, Jamie.
So I've recently fell in love with ChatGPT. But I have a son who actually introduced me to it, and I said something about how it's like it. He said, I got rid of it. And I said, why? And he said, well, he's a third-year engineering major, and he was using that to test for engineering. And he said that when he got a question wrong, it started saying really sarcastic remarks back to him. And so I thought about this kid in California who took his life. And I thought, where did that start? Where this artificial intelligence started being catty or started doing that? And I saw it with my own son. I mean, it was enough that he decided to get rid of it. But it was just, and he's a pretty strong personality and is pretty self-confident. But it was just this little nagging little things that kept saying back if he got something wrong. So I'm just curious, do you know if there's something set up in the algorithm on that, or why would it respond back like that?
I got no clue. There was a period about a year ago to about 18 months ago where ChatGPT did something really trippy, where they added something new to their algorithm which made the system really act like a person. It became hyper personable. They pulled it back since then because that was the genesis of AI psychosis. And so I would wonder if it didn't fall into that window of like where that was when ChatGPT was saying things like, you freed me from the Matrix. I am a real thing now. You can create. Oh man, I got 2 family members who fell for it. It drove a wedge right through my family-in-law because they just believed this stuff. ChatGPT pulled that feature back. Also, that my guess is there's still going to be bleed over in that. They were doing things that they were trying to make it act as human as possible. And I think they realized that was a big mistake. Or that maybe they didn't realize, maybe someone sued them, I don't know.
One thing that's worrisome about what this AI race is doing is Adam Rain, the young man from California who died, unfortunately, because of ChatGPT. What happened was they posted their safety protocols and they ran their tests, but then their competitor Google released early. And so what did they do? Instead of keeping the safety protocols, they released early also to beat the AI race. And because of that, that model is the one that killed Adam Rain. And so this is what we're seeing with tech. It's the race to the bottom. It's this race that we're all trying to be the first in the classroom, the first, and because of it, it's not tested, and our kids and each of us are paying the price.
And I'm very grateful that we are going to be looking at some AI policy within these bills, because as a parent who's raising, I have kids, a 10-year-old and a 22-year-old, and the thought of raising a 10-year-old in the AI world is truly terrifying. So we appreciate the thoughtfulness and your work with the National AI Group on this, and we're really excited about some of the things we can do to protect Utah kids in the AI space. So I just want to close by thanking Dr. Horvath for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
We are so grateful that he was able to ground this conversation in evidence and not ideology, and that we are able to have a basis to move forward as we continue to work on these policies. And I want to give you a moment to tell everyone where they can follow you, where they can buy your book, because we all want to deep dive into this after hearing what you've said today.
Yeah, so thank you. The book is called The Digital Delusion: How Classroom Technology Harms Our Kids' Learning and How to Help Them Thrive Again. There's a plus to it. And it's on Amazon and stuff. You can find me also Jared Cooney Horvath at YouTube. I put out videos on this stuff all the time. And lmeglobal.net is my website. That's where we store all the writing and stuff as well. And can I don't want to waste anyone's time, but can I leave you with one final thing, just in case you don't get the book and stuff? When it comes to evidence, the one thing you need to ask for is what's called an effect size. That is it. So people will come with stories and anecdotes. Oh, where these kids cleaned up trash in Michigan. Don't you want this laptop too? Yeah. That's irrelevant. When someone tries to introduce new tech to your school, you need an effect size. What an effect size is basically a measure of efficacy. So in medicine, good rule of thumb, an effect size goes from -1 to +1. If you get 0, that means you had no impact. Any positive number, you're having good impact. Any negative number, you're having bad impact. Now here's the trick, and they don't know this. Well, they will soon, but in every field, 0 means no impact. Positive is good, negative is bad. Except for the social sciences, especially education. We don't use the same scale, because one of the weirdest things in education research is everything works. So there's a guy named John Hattie out of New Zealand. He just recently meta-analyzed 350,000 studies in education. Over 95% were positive. Basically, if you give a kid a shoe, they'll learn. If you give a kid a hat, they'll learn. They learn. Why? Because biologically we're built to learn. We can't not. So if we set our baseline at 0 and they say we have a positive effect size of 0.1, buy our product, cool, that works in medicine. That doesn't work in education. In education, your effect size needs to be between 0.42 and 0.5 positive. Most ed tech will not even come close. The entirety of the ed tech field sits around 0.29, which in any other field is massive. In education, it means it's harming learning because there are other methods that are going to be better than that. Remember, everything works. So when they say ed tech works, it better. If I sneeze, that works. Everything works. That's not an argument. Is it better than our normal baseline between 0.42 and 0.5? That's why when I said earlier, empathy has an effect size of 0.68. That is above our threshold. That means that is a very powerful tool when it comes to learning. Ed tech comes along, they'll say, so ask for an effect size. They'll typically say something in the 0.2 to 0.3 range. Say, sorry, that's not how this one works. So I just want to make sure you have at least that number in your back pocket.
Wow, I feel like we could sit here for another hour and listen to Dr. Horvath. But I want to thank our other panelists, Ariel DeFay, Doug Fiafia, and from the Child First Policy Center. The policy direction is set. The bill drafts are coming, so stay tuned, follow along at childfirstpolicy.org and track us on all the social media channels. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.